Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 3rd of July. So this week, episode 36, season 7 of Motor Trade Radio podcast, bringing you all the chatter that matters. We are slightly different one this week, so Curtis is taking a well-earned week off. He's enjoying a bit of weather somewhere down south, so I have actually got the pleasure of being joined by two industry named co-hosts this morning. So we've got David Billsborough from Cheshire Cars. Welcome, David.
Hi Phil, and great to be back. Hi Andy, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you very much. Good to see you, Phil.
Yeah, good. So as I say, Andy Conde as well, the legend of the auction world. So again, welcome back on, Andy. It's been far too long.
No, it's always good to get back on and always good to have a chat.
So before we get going with you two guys, we just got a few shout outs from the last week. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to the fantastic interview there midweek with Andy Barrett, who is now the MD of Alpha Tain Group over in Dubai for Lexus and Toyota, ex Ford of Britain MD. So if you do get the chance, do head over, listen to that interview, get yourself a coffee because it's a good hour of chat there with Andy. But I do, I'd recommend anybody listening to that one if you haven't listened to it already. At the halfway point, I'll put a bit of a snippet in just to sort of tease you in what you are missing. And last Saturday, we had the pleasure of Devon Martin from Cap HPI that was giving his view on the recent movements within in the market. And again, have a listen to that. It gives you a bit of a perspective and a bit of insight into where he sees the market heading over the next month or two. So do head over to last week's podcast if you've not listened to that already and have a listen to that. So as always, we'll try and bring you some of the headlines for the week, but this week it is a little bit unique. So we better get over to Mr. Conde and Mr. Billsborough for this week's chat. So welcome, guys, and thanks for putting the time out this week to join us on the podcast and sitting in for Curtis.
No, it's great to be here. Thanks, Phil.
So to begin with, shall we get a little bit of an update, Andy, from yourself on what's happening in the wholesale sector at the minute, what you're seeing, what you're feeling? I mean, as we're talking now, you've just finished a sale, so it is hot off the press as some of the activity that you're starting to see again at the end of June as we enter July here. So what's your view of the market at the minute?
Well, I think the word that I've heard more than anything this year has been unprecedented. We've seen an unprecedented increase in prices, unprecedented interest in stock, and an unprecedentedly low amount of vehicles on sale. And when we had the considerable increase from May into June in cap values of just over 6.5%, there was I described it as the market took a little bit of a breather in that first week in June. And I thought it might have been the same today. We've seen another increase, month on across the board from 0 to 63 years old up to 4.8%. But today has been just as manic as ever. When I've seen some of the results coming through, they've all been extremely busy, and I think it represents the lack of supply in quality used cars. But interesting again, this two things that have really jumped out on me this week. Number one, we've seen that lower end of the market, those higher mileage, poorer quality vehicles struggle. Well, they've come back this week. They've been much better. We've had some much better results. And also, we've seen some of the larger groups, both dealers and supermarkets, are now having to buy grade 3s, grade 4s, which they wouldn't have looked at before. And that is because there's a shortage of those other quality cars. And I think, the other thing, of course, is that I've said many times, is that a lot of dealers now are being forced into, rather than shipping out part exchanges to the wholesale market, they're now having to retail themselves, and they're now selling older cars than they ever would before. So the market is still as buoyant, and as I said before, the word is unprecedented, that we've seen it before. So it's still very, very strong.
And last month when we saw I say last month at the end of May coming into June, we felt a pause when we saw that 6.8% increase at 3-year 60 from Cap HPI. And it was kind of that pause, wasn't it, in the sector that kind of eased off slightly in terms of that conversion and activity. Are you feeling that yet, or
no,
as much, or is it sort of continued as before?
I'm not sure. Do you know, I thought about that, about what happened at the end of May, and I'm not sure. Was it a pause? Were people taking a breather? Was it a little bit of a reality check? Well, this is where we are going forward. You know, and somebody asked me a question actually. You know, have cars actually increased in value so much, or have they found their true value? And I couldn't answer the question. And I suppose when you look at the whatever market we're in, supply and demand is the key. And while the used car market continues to have very few assets to sell, then prices are going to carry on going up. And I don't see, or certainly from today, there's been no impact in the 4.8% increase again. And I don't see that there's going to be. Our numbers for sale are probably as low as I can ever remember, and I don't see it's going to be any different. And I speak to our competitors all the time. Different auction groups, and everybody's telling me the same thing. So I don't think there's going to be any let up in what we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, and it does feel that after publication of the 4.8%, there doesn't seem to be. I think the report is from Cap HPI that it's still moving as it did at the end of May going into June. Although they published the 6.8, it actually before the month had even finished, the valuations continued to move up. So I think you're right. I think the trajectory and speed of movement might have eased slightly from what we saw in May going into June, but actually the direction is still on the increase. And I suppose really to get a better view of that is from yourself, David. I mean, you're active in lots of different areas of the market in terms of buying, not just through auctions, but actually off consumers as well. What are you seeing at the minute in terms of purchasing of stock and the prices in relation to what Andy was just saying?
Well, I think the market has experienced these high prices many we over the decades that we've all of us been in the industry. But what we haven't seen, I don't think, and we will obviously we are seeing it, is this prolongedness of the actual pricing and just the steep rise in the prices. And I think that's been driven by quite a few areas really. If we look at two firms that have come into the market in the last couple of years, Cinch and Cazoo, for example, that weren't there before, and then the dealer groups that have put in a lot of emphasis on used car retail for 21. I think that's pushing up the demand in the market. And then of course with that we're just coming out of a pandemic, with people's lives still very much in the air if they've got a job or whether they'll need to find another job. And so I think there's a lot of positivity, but there's also quite a little bit of sort of holding back. So this could even go slightly higher as we go through the year and into the autumn as well. I think people are staying in the country. They're not going away on holidays. They're spending the money in the country, so they need to get there, don't they? So they're probably updating the cars for more space or whatever. So there's lots of dynamics going on as to why we're seeing these high prices. So I think dealers will just have to get used to it. I don't think it's going to be going away anytime soon.
And before the recording, the three of us are talking obviously about the competitiveness in the market, that whether it is just two people bidding on the one car within the auction world on Manheim online, or whether it is buying a car off a customer where you make your offer and 9 times out of 10 you just expect that negotiation to take place and the sale to go through. Are you starting to see different dynamics there from your perspective? And then we'll go over to Andy and get his view in terms of what he's seen and the bidding online market.
Yeah, I think you've got to have done your research as a retailer now more than any. You've got to have researched the model that you're going to make a phone call about or going to visit before you do it. I think the research is key. And it's certainly, if you've done your research and you've researched correctly, then you've got a very good chance of winning that vehicle. It isn't always the case because someone else always sees it differently. But there's a lot of preparation that is needed to go into retail now. And that's become more and more so over the last sort of several years, really. I think it's now reaching the pinnacle where if you haven't done your research or you haven't spotted something unique about the car that can give you an edge over someone that probably hasn't, then, you know, you could end up not buying the car. And if you're not buying the car, then you haven't got the opportunity. So it's all to do with the amount of research and understanding that in the consumer market of purchasing, people want to move the car quickly. Hence the well-known website that promises evaluation in 60 seconds. So everything's now in real time, and they need the retailers not just to pick up the phone and have a nice 5, 10, 15-minute chat, but actually action that chat into a collection very, very quickly. Because if you don't get in there and collect the car, somebody else will.
And Andy, what from an online and in terms of the bidders and buyers, are there any sort of dynamics that the probably dynamics that we may have seen throughout the pandemic and into 2021, but you know, stock is getting tougher and tougher. The market is buoyant. The values are obviously rising. Are you seeing any dynamics in terms of the number of bidders, the type of bidders, the activity from the bidders on Manheim Online?
Yeah, I think that you look at today in Manchester, we had 220 cars, real nice cars. When we started the sale, 195 people actively looking to buy cars. Now, number one, you wouldn't have got just short of 200 people there for that sale. So that's the first thing. So there's more and more people buying online. There's more people who, you know, I spoke to who vowed would never buy a car online, are now very, very comfortable in buying a car online. And you say to them, you know, would you come back if physical ever returned? And they say, I don't think I would. You know, I think they come for a bit of fellowship. I think they come for a bit of, you know, a bit of a chat and to see the pals. I don't think they will come to buy any cars. Well, you know, hopefully they would, but I don't think that will be the prime reason that they'd come and buy cars. They now realise that it's a lot easier. You can cover 3 or 4 sales. You don't have to travel up and down the country and be stuck in a car. And also, I think, you know, it dawned on me the other night. I was doing a sale, unfortunately, at 4:30 on Tuesday afternoon in Manchester when the England game kicked off at 5 o'clock. Yeah. And in a normal world, we'd have probably done 2 things. One is we'd have probably moved the time of the sale. And we'd have probably, we may have even said, well, you know, we're going to move it a day, or we'd have certainly started earlier. When we started the sale off, there was 97 people logged online, and that figure went up all the way through the sale. And it was, you know, people had got TVs, laptops on, and they were bidding at the same time. So I think the whole dynamics of what we're doing now, and, you know, who would have thought it, that a year last March when we first went into lockdown, that the industry would change so quickly in a relatively, you know, slow period of time. I think it's something that we've all looked at doing. I think we all wanted to do it, but I think if there's been any, you know, and a very, very small glimmer of good that's come out of what's happened with regard to business and being locked down, I think we've all become braver and bolder in what we're doing, and I think that's the difference.
And I suppose, obviously you, David, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but, you know, in terms of you were an avid buyer at physical and digital auctions, as well as, you know, very much in the buying from consumers and buying from within the trade. In terms of what Andy's just been talking about there, in terms of that return to physical auction, that environment, and what you operate within, and, you know, we're talking about, you know, you're buying cars from consumers or from dealers, and you're having to rely on descriptions and images before you go and collect the vehicle. What's your view in terms of that physical auction environment and that returning to it, or returning to that hybrid of a marketplace?
Well, actually, Phil, I embraced the online at about 2009 and 10. It's an awful long time ago now, and of course I've not visited physical auction for quite some time, to be honest. So for me, it was just normal business. There's a lot of people, as Andy has said, that have said or did say they wouldn't, buy online. They want to see them, touch them, etc. And I think it's changed. Everyone sort of is a resistance to change. Some are innovators and go and make the change, and others are sort of take time. And I think obviously what the last 12 months has done is force everyone into the same funnel. And I think now 12 months on, everyone's used to it. And I think there will be people that will still go back to auctions, and I think Andy's right in what he said about that. But I think you can always visit 3, 4, 5 sites and different companies even, so you can have 2 or 3 different auction companies on your screen and not moving from your seat. If you look at it in retail terms as well, because there's been a huge change in retail, hasn't there, in the last 12 months through, as you know, I've offered free delivery for 10 years on every car anywhere in the country. And that's something that people have had to adopt rather. So there's been a big change for both from wholesale and retail in the last 12 months. It's been a huge change. And so I think it brings economies, savings. Obviously, if you're not travelling to the auctions, then obviously you should be able to be more productive in the office or in the showroom, and in retail as well. If you've got an e-commerce website or something that's very similar to an e-commerce website, people can actually buy a car, propose on finance, get a part exchange without talking to another person, then that's got to be positive for everyone concerned, doesn't it? Because hopefully your cars will move quicker, so you're back into the wholesale market in a shorter time because the vehicle's sold and moved on. So there's lots of synergies that are going on, and I think there's more to come. I think video's still got a long way to come in retail. There's people making good use of video, but there's still an awful lot of dealers that are just not making the right choices on video. So there is more to come, I think, in retail. I think we haven't seen we're on the sort of 2 or 3 rungs of the ladder, really. I think there's a lot more to be got, both from the consumer point of view and from a dealer's point of view.
And I suppose from yourself, Andy, when we entered the lockdown back in March the 23rd of 2020, it seems a lifetime ago. It's this move to the online environment, this new working practices that the auctioneers and yourself have to adopt and get used to now, and not just from the vendors, the auctioneers, and as well as the buyers. How have you seen that progress now through the various different stages of lockdowns and the market as it is today? I mean, we're over 12 months on now since the initial lockdown, and the market has changed. How are you guys now working in that world, and from the buyers and the vendors and the auctioneers' perspective?
Yeah, I think number one, from my point of view, when we started off, and we obviously didn't do anything from March, April, May, and then sort of end of May, we started to do some sales online. Initially, we started to do sales from home, but myself and the senior leadership team within Manheim, we made a decision that we wanted to make the experience of buying cars as real as possible. So we took the decision. Some people thought it was wrong. Some people thought it was right, that we wanted our auctioneers still to go to the auctions. So all the way along, which I think was the right thing to do. A lot of people said, well, it's not very safe. You should be doing the sales from home, but everybody bought into it. And I think, number one, from a business point of view. Number two, definitely from a mental point of view, that we were able to get out and about. And we were very fortunate, as you know, Phil. A lot of people in our industry, they've not moved for 17 or 18 months. They've been sat at home in their offices, and they haven't moved from a computer screen. And my heart goes out to a lot of those people. Well, exactly. They're not able to get out, but we were able. So we made the decision that we would make the environment and the experience of buying auction from Manheim as real as possible. And I think the fact we all went to rostrums, we're all when people see us now, we look like a bunch of welders, or we look, or doctors, because we're all we're all masked up, and either whether it be the sort of the visors or the masks, and we're all very careful. We've got partitions on the rostrums, and I don't probably see that changing, even when the restrictions lift for some time. But we made the decision that we would do that, and we want to make the experience as real as possible, and treat people as if it was a live auction. So there was a number of things that I was really keen to get over to the team. Number one, that we had to bring that auction to life, and we had to make those people, whether it be buyers or vendors, feel when they were listening to the sale that they were there in the auction. I think, on the whole, we've done a really good job on that. I as David, I had a saying from day one: smile on your face, pound in your pocket, and that's what it was all about. Because
yes.
we wanted to make people enjoy the experience. There's nothing worse than sitting there for 2 or 3 hours and you're not going to enjoy the experience of what you're doing. So you've got to have a bit of fun. But you've also got to make sure that, the cake always has to be big enough for everybody to have a slice out of, because if there's no cake, there's no profit and people aren't going to come back. So we were very mindful of that. And then thirdly, and I've used it many times, I'll use the football analogy, whereby if you were commentating on Match of the Day, you didn't really have to say that much, because visually you could see the ball and you could see the players, which reflects in a physical auction. But if you're commentating on the radio, you have to say more and you have to bring that game to life. And I think that's what we had to do. And that was what I tried to go over to all my team. This is what we need to do. We need to bring the game to life. We need to bring the auction to life. And to be honest, the following that we've had, and from everybody and the comments we've had, David, you've been a real leading light on that. But the concert have been fantastic. And at the end of the sale, for people to say, thank you, we really enjoyed it. We're coming. We'll be there again next week. I think that has meant an awful lot, because we've had to keep our chins up, and in some sense it's been tough for all of us. It's not been easy. We've driven on empty motorways, we've gone home on empty motorways, but when you get there, you still have to be that same, buoyant, lively person, and it's not always easy. So it has been a strain. I think it's been easier for some of the younger people, and if I do have a concern, I worry about if we're ever allowed to come back to some form of physical presence, how will they react? How will people react to taking physical bids? For me, I'd much rather see the whites of a bidder's eyes than see him pressing a button. And I think it will be a big cultural change. I think not only for the auctioneer, I think for everybody, particularly. We've almost got to learn, a lot of the younger ones. I've been in the job probably far too long, but I think a lot of the younger ones will have to learn again how to take bids, and it will be, and again, it'll be a process that we would all have to get used to again, and again another cultural change, and no different to a buyer either, no different.
I would just echo what Andy said there. I think you've done a great job, the team, and I certainly enjoy participating in all the sales for all the branches. So I think, Andy, it's the right decision. And you've engaged with the buyers as a team, and I'd just like to say that to you.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. So we just head over to a midway plug, and then we'll listen to a snippet from the Andy Barrett interview as well from earlier on in the week. So you are listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. This is the weekly one-stop shop for all your biggest car retailing headlines, and available on demand wherever you listen to your podcast feed.
Now, Andy, you mentioned something that quite interested me about the Lexus showroom experience being akin to a boutique. So I'm kind of curious, would our listeners, especially those Toyota and Lexus dealers who are listening in, would they recognise your sites? And also, are OEM CIs less evident in the UAE?
Great question. I think if you look at Lexus, they do have a global CI. So actually, when you look at a Lexus, whether it's a boutique or a slightly bigger store, and we have one very big store, which is like a premium 5-star hotel in the service reception alone, they are a premium standard, but they are around the world. So I think a Lexus dealer would recognize attributes of Lexus in any showroom where they go. But, for me, coming from a volume manufacturer into what was a premium manufacturer at that point, because I started initially with Lexus before I took Toyota on, it was all about the guest experience. And, I was fascinated by the attention to detail and how I could improve that. And we're really lucky because the Intercontinental Hotel in parts of Dubai are part of Al Futtaim. So I spent time with their management looking at what makes the difference between a standard experience and a truly premium one, and tried to apply that back from, the aroma that you inject into the showroom, the flowers on front desk, or the way you are greeted, because every showroom has greeters in Lexus. So it was interesting, but I genuinely think that the Lexus standard is so high around the world that actually you get a similar experience. But CIs are different. When you're a distributor, you have a little bit more flexibility. But I think in our case, what it means is that we probably exceed them by some significant distance because, we've invested in truly world-class operations. Some of them are very large, some are not so large, but they're all of a truly, truly very high standard. And I think that ensures that we give customers a really good experience, but also makes it a great place for our employees to work, and that's super important.
And Andy, I do recall you being a stickler for that attention to detail, and I understand you have actually been out on some forecourts with a ball of string.
Yes, in fact, it's interesting because, I've given more people balls of string, and they've looked at me with a very vague look until I show them what to do with it. But, and that was something that Sir Arnold Clark taught me. Yeah, so, it's amazing all these things that you pick up along the way, but you carry forward in your career. And I think that's what's so wonderful about this industry, that there's no really super new ideas. They're just adaptations and applying them in different circumstances. So, a good lesson for all.
And that's all about aligning the cars neatly on the forecourt, isn't it?
So we'll just quickly head over to a few headlines, if you don't mind, guys. We'll keep it short, and if you've got any views on them, then I'll welcome that. So the first one is on AM Online, and this is another acquisition from our good friend of the podcast, Dash Gupta from Marshall Motor Group, and they've confirmed that they're continuing their acquisition, and they've got the addition of a Nissan dealership down in Leicester. The completion of the acquisition from Renault Retail Group continues their growth within that Nissan business expansion and the expansion of the Nissan portfolio, which already includes dealerships in Grantham, Lincoln, and includes the purchase of a 3-acre freehold site in Abbey Road in Leicester. So I suspect at some point we'll probably try and get Dash back onto the show and talk through some of his recent business acquisitions, as well as his house move that he alluded to recently as well. So, I mean, from your side, David, I mean, you've seen these groups continue to expand, and there's acquisitions taking place, and what are you seeing from an independent dealer perspective? Do you think that's a positive, a negative, or do you not see any difference really?
I try and concentrate, obviously, on my own business, what I'm doing and what I've got plans to do. But I do read the daily feeds coming through, and obviously listen to the podcast every Saturday anyway. But so this one was no surprise, really. I think there's still growth to come from Marshall, isn't there? I think, as you said, this takes them to 3 Nissan outlets and this 3-acre freehold site, which will be interesting, won't it? Where they'll probably obviously going to develop that. They're not going to leave that as it is, empty, or whatever's on there at the moment. But I think Dash is a shrewd operator, isn't he? And he's got a good team around him. So I think inevitable that there'll be more to come from them. Didn't they do something recently with Jaguar as well?
Yes,
didn't they? Yeah. So
yeah,
I think we'll see a few more acquisitions during the year, I guess. But no doubt you'll get him back onto sort of give you something. I think will he be able to give you something? I don't know. It's all guarded, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I mean, one thing is clear with Dash. You know, he has set his stall out for who he wants to partner with. He's focused fully on, you know, that partnership relationship between the OEMs, and whether that's within the JLR, the Nissan, or Volvo, and the others that he operates within. He's very clear in terms of what he wants in terms of brand partners and strategic coverage of those brand partners as well. And I think Andy is a very good customer and client of Manheim in terms of that auction wholesale world as well.
Yeah, and when you talk about Dash, you know, I see an awful lot of synergies between Marshall Motor Holdings and Cox Automotive UK. You know, great leaders, look after the people, got a vision of what we want to do, and are keen to work in partnership with people that we want to do business with. And I see that, you know, there really is a great link up between the two companies, and I'm really excited for everything that they do, because, as you say, you know, I think Dash is a real leader, and he's full of enthusiasm, and you know, I'm really pleased for what they do, and they're going to be expanding, and I think they'll be expanding. I think a lot of these big dealer groups will expand even more.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And sticking with Nissan and the news that's come out this week, which is big news for definitely the UK in terms of vehicle supply. But in Car Dealer, the headline is Nissan announces plans for a new 1 billion gigafactory and new electric car in Sunderland. So this is kind of that move now that's been hovering around, and there was a lot of questions around the Brexit and what would happen with the EU exit, whether Nissan would stay in the UK or look for opportunities elsewhere. But they're fairly firm now staying in the UK, and to be investing in a 1 billion gigafactory in Sunderland, and the plant will create 1,600 jobs and will be fully operational by 2024. So I think this one is a significant move for electric vehicles, and particularly for the UK automotive sector, isn't it, guys?
Yeah, I was obviously really pleased, I think, as we all were, to hear the news this morning that it broke yesterday, didn't it? That there's going to be some sort of announcement, and it came this morning on my way into the office, actually. So I was really pleased because the Northeast is a beautiful part of the country, and they've got we've always had people up there that are always prepared to get stuck in, and you know, and I think over 30 years Nissan have seen that, haven't they? And they've managed to secure it with government funding, a certain amount of government funding into the factory. So I think it's a positive day for the country in that area in particular, isn't it? So I think that's really, really positive, really good, and I was really pleased to see it. And there's 860,000 people employed in UK car manufacturing, apparently. Yeah. So there's a heck of a lot of people, and I think they've said that the sort of the data analyst people have said about, I think, 6 or 8 extra gigafactories needed. So there's probably going to be hopefully some more good news coming out of that side of the industry in the coming months, I hope, anyway.
David, can I just ask you? You know what's you live in leafy Cheshire? What's the appetite for electric vehicles in what is a predominantly, you know, I was going to say naturist, but I'll rephrase that. What is, you know, an agricultural green belt county? What is the appetite for electric vehicles? Have you sort of dipped your foot into the electric vehicle market yet? And if you have, what's been the response?
Yeah, no, we have. We've had both fully electric and hybrids. We've not had enough of them, but we've had them. I do feel I've got to do more to, you know, get some information about them and just be sure that they are the right vehicles for the right moment, really. I think it's timing, isn't it? Whatever we do, it's timing. If we get the timing right, then it will be fantastic. But in Cheshire itself, and certainly in South Cheshire where we're based, people really aren't coming in or emailing in asking about EVs. I think what is more on people's minds is how does that work then? How am I going to charge that in the street? Where am I going to charge it? I think that still needs a lot of work, and obviously that's again infrastructure. And I think if you think about a car, a power socket, and a lead, those are the three things. But what we're not sort of seeing, I don't think anyway, as a nation even, is just how many extra power plants we're going to need to supply that electricity. Because there's no mistake. Let's not cover it over here. There's going to have to be a lot of investment in the coreness of the power plants, because at the moment we haven't got enough power plants to supply the electricity. So I think for now we're not personally seeing people knocking on the door or emailing, telephoning, asking for EVs. I think there's a perception, and it's a correct perception, that they're far more expensive. And then the shortcomings are, one, the range, although that will improve obviously with technology, the range of a vehicle, and how do they go about charging it? In Crewe itself, where we are, there's very few charge points for the town. Very, very few. So it does need to improve drastically.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was reading the Times on Sunday, and one of the guys who was writing an article, and he was obviously in London, and they ventured into the electric market, and the family had bought an electric vehicle, and they were going to Pembrokeshire on holiday, and they actually ran out of charge, and I think they were about I think they said it was about 30 odd miles away from where they were in Pembrokeshire. They managed to find somewhere. But there was a queue, and I think in the end he said he managed to just put enough charge on it to get to where he needed to. But I think that is going to be the problem. I'm with you. I think I told the story about the where I live, not far from the Osler Street Gaboin Orthopaedic Hospital, and there was a headline in our local paper. Orthopaedic installs. I think it was 2 or 3 electric points. Well, they've probably got 800 staff and 1,000 visitors every day, and all of a sudden you've got 3 electric points. And I'm with you. I think there needs to be, I'm actually sat here now outside a petrol station, and I'm looking, and I don't even think it's a big petrol station. I don't even think there's an electric charging point here. I think that is going to be the issue.
Yeah, no, there's some. You can't get away from the fact that the giga plants, in terms of that volume of supply of batteries and support of building the batteries is required. But actually, like you say, the pressure and growth within that charging infrastructure, and as you said, David, the pressure that puts on the grid as well to supply that charging. There's a lot to happen in a very, what is going to be a short period of time. 2030 isn't that long for the industry to get to that target, what they need to do. And I think this week there's been a report from the SMMT calling on the government that they do need to start accelerating this investment. And maybe this Nissan plant is the first of that, because there's been this the investment and support from the UK government with Nissan to invest in that gigafactory. But I think there's a lot more for them to do.
Well, I think also what is another interesting thing, which I'm sure will get talked about more as we go forward, is just how to recycle the batteries when they've reached end of life. That's a challenge as well, isn't it?
So moving on to sticking with car dealer, but we won't spend too much detail on this, because I think we've talked obviously about the supply and demand, but there's an article in Car Dealer this week that as used cars rocket in value, we asked dealers which cars have been their best performers, and a bit of an interview there from Car Dealer with various independent and franchise dealers across the network, getting that view on some of their viewpoints of what's been happening from people like Greg Joyce, CEO of Anchor Cars there, through to Henrik Levinson of General Sales Manager LMC in Farnham Limited. So if you do get time, maybe head over to that article and just read on some of the views, and probably support some of the views that Andy and David has just been talking about earlier around the dynamics in the market of what's been happening in recent months of the values as well. So moving on to the final story for this week is in AM, and this is Peter Vardy launches new Cars, and that's Cars with a Z on the end, brand at former Vauxhall site. So again, Peter Vardy Group has officially left the Vauxhall franchise network now and launched its Cars Supermarkets brand at 6 former franchise sites across Scotland. So it kind of supports what you were mentioning earlier, David, this sort of move into these supermarkets. But I mean, does this add further pressure on what is already a challenging market around stock and acquisition of stock and the prices of product now, as we see the growth of the supermarkets, whether that is the Kazoos, the Kazams, the Cinch of the world, etc., the car shops, sitting supermarkets, etc., that all need volume of product. What's your view on that?
I think I did look at the story. Obviously, a very good operator first and foremost, and I believe, well, from what I've seen and heard, we're very well run, organised, and they planned to buy more sites to double their annual used car volumes as well. So I think, in answer to your question, yes, it will increase pressure on an already pressurised system. Because obviously they'll need to fill the spaces with used vehicles, and they'll have to get them from somewhere. Interestingly, though, they have launched a buying site, haven't they?
Yes.
Goodbye Car. Yeah. So that's an interesting one, because I think that's probably going to hear more from some of the retailers as well, such as Kazoo, I guess, on similar. So that will again further pressurise the supply, and then we've got all the other online platforms who are offering cars to dealers from various sources. So I think it's a challenge, but I think also a good independent dealer has got a head start in knowing the market, and having been in the market for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, hopefully that will stand that dealer in good stead to continue to, remain profitable, even though the times are changing quickly. So it will put more pressure on, because those cars won't be going into wholesale, will they? They'll be keeping them for retail. So yeah,
and I think it's, I mean, we've got to remember that although today currently there is market dynamics that is putting pressure on supply, but you would hope that as we move forward, those pressures start to alleviate. The operators, the good operators, will survive through the tougher times. And as you say, Peter Vardy, he's got fantastic credentials in terms of what he's done. Made a significant move there, moving away from Vauxhall and focusing on used vehicles. And he knows exactly what he's doing, does Peter Vardy, and he's a fantastic operator. And from yourself, David, Andy, have you got anything to your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think you just hit upon saying about Peter Vardy, and likewise we just spoke briefly about Marshalls. What they've done is they've employed key people. They've employed the right people, and sometimes we probably overlook how important that is. And when you look at what Peter Vardy and Marshalls as well, Marshall got fantastic people that understand the job. You can't beat experience. And when I look at some of these companies who are coming in, and it does concern me that there's a lot of people that haven't got motor trade experience that maybe just think you can sit there and press a button and the world will just come right. You can't beat experience. You look what Peter Vardy does. Got a great disposal manager in there now, which is a fantastic move. He's got some really good buyers. Dash Gupta got one of the best disposal managers that I've ever worked with in Jerry Medcalf, and they really are key positions. And I think sometimes we've overlooked how important people in key roles are within our industry.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think experience and knowledge counts for a lot, doesn't it? Algorithms aren't the answer for everything, are they? Essentially, you need that other element. And as you say, both great operators in Marshalls and Peter Vardy there. So we'll watch that one expand, and we'll see the battle at the top there, I presume.
Yeah, definitely.
So moving on to And Finally now. So we've no And Finally in terms of a press release, and Curtis has let me down. He normally finds a sort of a fairly unique, off-the-cuff And Finally. We've had everything from electric classic cars, Hillman Imps, and all sorts of stuff. And I presume you haven't got your Vespa yet in an electric form, David?
No, but I won't be doing that type of sleep.
You've seen, you know, you can convert them. I did send you a thing that you can convert your Vespa into electric.
I didn't want to look at it. Didn't want to look at it. No, I didn't want to see it. Goodness me.
So it's time for crystal ball time, guys. So let's head over to yourself, Andy. Just, you know, get your view on what your thoughts are for you know, whether that's weeks, months, or the next quarter. What are you thinking? What are your expectations? What do you see from a wholesale market in terms of you know, pricing, demand, etc.? You know, we're coming out of lockdown, the new date of the 19th of July. Still restrictions here, there, and everywhere. You know, what's your view over the next, you know, month or so?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you my forecast for the rest of the year, and that probably makes it easier. I don't think we'll see a massive influx of vehicles. I think there'll still be a shortage of quality stock. I think prices will remain very strong. You know, you look at August. I don't know when the last time we saw a book increase going from July into August, because in the past August has been a quiet month with people going on holiday. So I don't think we'll see any effect. I think prices will continue to rise. Now they may plateau in September when furlough ends, because we might just see a little bit of realism and you know, people just may be a bit concerned. But I think the demand will keep it going. And then as we go into next year, of course, we then have to we're then going to have to cope with the fact that how many people that we know, Phil, you and I, are coming out of company cars. We're going to buy our own cars. So those fleet companies that are selling company cars will not have the supply of vehicles, but people like us will have to go out and buy a car. So we'll have to go out and find a car. So there'll be no cars to buy. People will want to buy cars. Manufacturers, you know, one thing that we haven't discussed, and Phil, you and I spoke about it briefly this morning. You know, we've spoke a lot about the effect of COVID, and almost Brexit seems to have been brushed under the carpet. So I think, you know, you get 19th of July out of the way. I think there has to be then some real about Brexit, how we're going to get cars into the country. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a step into the unknown. But from my view, I can't see anything changing with regard to supply of quality used vehicles. I think the demand will remain there. I think prices will remain strong. And I think David will be doing even more miles on the train up and down to Scotland, trying to find some decent cars for him to sell. And I think that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Sorry, David.
I couldn't agree with that. But positively, think of the profit opportunities.
Well, absolutely.
So David, over to you. I mean, you know, what's in light of? I mean, they say Andy and I talk all the time about the market, and you know, it's no, you know, semiconductors, rubber supplies, EU exit, transition of vehicles, whether they send those cars to the UK or whether they send them to some of the European international markets. You know, there's nothing changing in the short term. You know, the supply is, you can't build a semiconductor factory and have it up and running within a month. You know, these things take time. So the view is, as Andy says, 2022 before we start seeing a recovery from the new vehicle market. But from your view, from a retail perspective, you know,
well, I think the retail demand will probably remain fairly buoyant. I think there'll be a demand to basically want to buy. Obviously, coupled with that is the availability, which Andy is absolutely right. I don't think will increase substantially enough. I think it could even contract as people ramp up the used car operations in the bigger groups. Who knows? But I think the demand will be there, and I think those dealers have just got to embrace every channel possible to them to try and get that vehicle, win it, and prepare it, and retail it. You know, advertise and retail the vehicle. I think we need to accept that for this year. I think Andy's absolutely right. I don't think much is going to change. Maybe into next year, who knows? But certainly, you asked the question about the next quarter. I don't see any change. I think it will still be a challenge to get the cars and to maintain levels of return on investment. So, yeah, I think body shops are going to be busy. Workshops too, because obviously the spin-off, people have to buy cars that they wouldn't have ordinarily even considered. So they'll be pushing into, you know, maybe grade 3s and 4s, where they would have maybe looked at only at 1s and 2s before. So I think there will be. I think you get the car into your dealership and you've got the body shop or you've got the workshop, as most people do, and I think they'll be busy. And I think it's also I think Swan's Way, actually, Phil, a few months or so ago when you had the brothers on, they mentioned about their sales staff ringing customers and trying to, as they would be doing anyway, but more so, trying to see if there's a possibility of, if not selling them another car, did he still want that car? Is it surplus to requirements sat on the drive? There's a lot of cars sat on the drive going nowhere, isn't there?
Yes.
So that could be an opportunity for some people to, win some business by buying the customers' cars off them directly. So interesting times ahead.
No, I couldn't. I mean, thanks, guys. I mean, it sounds like that. David wants to think about the next quarter only. Doesn't want to think about the final quarter. Just get through the end of get June finished, get through July, and then start to think that way. Andy, I think thinking that longer term. I think we are in this for the long haul. Nothing's changing immediately. As supply tightens, the market strengthens, and the operators are looking at alternative routes to the new car market, entering the used car market, and therefore adding further pressure, as well as people such as myself and you, Andy, trying to enter the used car market to buy an alternative to the company vehicle. So I think all in all, I think it's about understanding the market, speaking to yourself, Andy, speaking to experts within the industry on a regular basis, understanding what's happening, and pulling on the resources available to get the insight and knowledge to ensure that you're maximising your opportunities as best as possible. So that only remains me to say thanks, guys, for sitting in for Curtis. I'm sure he'll be eagerly listening to how his replacement co-host got on this morning on the podcast. He probably thinks he can put his feet up now and that's it. But you're welcome back on as always. Again, thanks for sitting in the seat this morning and joining me on the podcast, guys.
Thanks, Phil. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to coming on again in the future.
Yes, and Phil, likewise for me, and everybody, don't forget, keep a smile on your face, and I'll try and keep putting a pound in your pocket.
Pound in your pocket.
Smile on your face, pound in your pocket. We'll add that to the hashtag with all the chatter that matters.
Thank you.
So,
I wonder who thought of that hashtag as well.
Exactly. Well done, David.
Yeah, well done. So that's it for now, guys. So thanks for listening. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Thanks for joining us for all the chatter that matters. We're back again next weekend with all the latest on car retail headlines from across the media. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thanks, guys. Speak to you soon.